You recently posted a tweet where you were asking a number of questions that I think are interesting. What has the dark side of Me Too been? And then also the question of how many of these celebrity prominent Me Too cases turned out to be legitimate. Seems like a lot of them did not. And you look into those in your Substack essay and your tweet to an extent. Also, you ask who is behind this cultural shift, and do we really fully understand their motives or how all of this really came about with Me Too and the rise of Me Too? I want to talk about all that because those are the kinds of questions that I ask here. But first of all, like, you have a story with a Me Too, and I'm just going to call it hoax, a Me Too hoax early on in Me Too that was perpetuated against you. And I know you've talked about this before on Bret Easton Ellis's show and can refer people to that as well. But I'm just curious, kind of, where are you at with all of that now, and how do you think about that looking back on it?
Well, look, on Me Too in general, there's sort of the legitimate part, and then once people see the legitimate part, it's obvious that you could create something that looks very similar to one of the legitimate ones, and but you just made it up, and you can accomplish some goal. And so if you give people a magic wand where they can get people fired or whatever it is, a lot of people are going to wave that wand, all over Wilshire Boulevard.
Right.
And so a lot of it was legit. I'm sure there appear to be some very, very real cases, which is what makes it complicated. And then there were a bunch of cases that were not real and that really were motivated by sort of a broader sense of mission that, like, oh, we have to take a lot of these guys out and free up certain jobs.
Because one of the things you get into in your essay is how, at the same time you've got the rise of Me Too, you have a lot of activists in the industry, in the entertainment industry, very loudly demanding that you have equal 50-50 men and women in terms of executive leadership in the studios?
You had Time's Up, which was supposed to be like a legal defense fund, but at the same time as being a legal defense fund, it had goals that it was supposed to achieve in terms of what percent of jobs were going to wind up in this category and that other category, which is a little odd because that's not normally what a legal defense fund does or concerns itself with.
There are these forces that agitate for someone's firing that do want to see that, because the person who succeeded you was a woman, right, at Amazon, and a lot was made of that, right?
Right. So you have people who actually have a personal interest.
Right.
You really have all sorts of motivation. Then you have people who they don't care specifically about this individual and that individual, but they just want to see sort of a mass change, not over 20 years, but over like 20 minutes of, the top people in the business. And like, this has to happen now. And that's the whole concept of time. That's why it's called Time's Up. All this stuff has to happen now. It can't be some kind of evolution. So there were people who are heavily motivated in that way, and I think played a significant role in saying, like, what should all the rules be? The rules should be that you kind of can't speak up for yourself. No one is going to print that in a publication.
You're talking about, sorry, you're saying, like, after you've been falsely accused, and it seems like you experienced this too, that there are or maybe up until recently, there have been these sort of rules of decorum for how you should conduct yourself, and they were really debilitating in terms of you defending yourself, because one of the things that you're told is be quiet, be silent, don't fight back, right?
Yeah, that was considered in sort of Me Too version 1 as being inappropriate. So if you make any case that, like, maybe this is not true, that's inappropriate. And then, another Me Too version 1 rule is that, all infractions are the same.
Right.
So you could be a murderer, or you could have made a passing comment to someone at some point 20 years ago.
Right.
And the point is, we don't want to make distinctions, like if you're in the doghouse, you're in the doghouse, and just assume everybody's a murderer.
And they just love Right. I mean, in your situation, is that basically what
It was a
happened?
person I had never met in my life. And, we wound up together for like a few minutes, going like from one party to another at Comic-Con. And we've never been alone. There was always a person right there. And, there was some banter, and we got out and took a selfie, and like that was it. So she did complain that she didn't like the tenor of the conversation in the Uber, but Amazon, looked into it, and at the time there were rules about like you it's not just like you complain and people are automatically fired. Like you have to actually do something.
An actual investigation has, how novel.
And so that did not, so I was kept on. It was, not sexual harassment or whatever.
Gotcha.
And then years later, there was apparently a lot of pressure from the Hollywood Reporter to, let's try to turn this into a big story.
Right.
And then finally, they printed a big story, and the whole essence of it was this one line of dialogue that I definitely never said. And again, there's a witness right there. So if we go to court one day, I'm definitely going to win.
And nobody took you to court, isn't it interesting, or tried to take you to court?
Oh,
right?
Of course not, because there's absolutely no case.
Right.
I mean, it's not against. You can't make a civil claim for like I find this person annoying.
Right.
It's
not yet.
I mean,
Blake Lively's trying to. That's what she's trying to. I mean, I feel like what's happening to Baldoni in a way is a kind of a shade or two, but yours was just this brief interaction anyway. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, and then never saw her again in my life. Like totally random person you've never seen, and you make there's some banter in the cab, and you forget about it, right?
Right.
And that. So I actually think it's the weakest case.
It is so
of the
weak.
Whole history of Me Too in Hollywood.
It's so weak.
Which is why no one ever wants to mention it or anything, because it just makes the whole thing look bad. And in general,
and the Hollywood, I just want to say too, like the Hollywood Reporter article, I looked at that, and I think there was another article written sometime afterward, major publication, and when I looked at the articles, I just saw, and this happens all the time with these situations, how in order to try to bolster the major claim, as ridiculous as it was, they bring in these little snippets from your life of like rumor or gossip or people saying this or that. And the thing is, but here's the thing, Roy, that just I thought was astounding. They couldn't find anything actually even shady to say about you. And so there were just these sort of bizarre attempts to malign you with nothing. And two of them stand out for me. One of them was an allegation that at an after work party or something, you'd been a little too tipsy, which I'm like, and I'm not even saying that's true or not true or whatever, but I'm thinking, oh, you're telling me that a Hollywood executive hanging out in a party is good. I mean, it was so stupid. And then the other one that just made me laugh out loud. Apparently, you scowl at employees too much in meetings.
Well, the thing is, in that era, you really didn't have to say anything serious.
Right.
It just, the point was that you had a headline and you said something. And the convention became that what you do is you get as quickly as possible past the substantive, here's the thing that this person did. Right. Move past that very quickly, or don't even dig into it. And so, and the way to write one of these articles is you move from the allegation, which can be pretty vague, and you spend most of the time talking about like how people felt, how people felt about it. That's like the substance of the article.
Right.
And that's how you get the article to be 1,000 words or whatever it is. And and maybe you can complain about something irrelevant, like, 2 years ago he parked in someone's space. That was no good, And I mean, that was the convention at the time. But, in the very moment of the end of 2017, that was enough. And like, it becomes problematic when all the actual facts are put on the table. So just a very minor example, but there was that reporter at the Washington Post where there was another reporter at the Post who like retweeted something that was a joke, right? And this woman, Felicia Somnes or something, and she made like a federal case of it, and but that all fell apart, and she got fired. And the problem is that everybody could see what the tweet was. It wasn't the
That it
kind of
wasn't bad.
thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It wasn't the kind of thing where like the article is going to express it so vaguely, and then they're just going to say, "Oh, people felt horrible," and so you couldn't use that tactic. And the same thing happened with Amber Heard. Like everyone agreed with her, and then once all the facts were put on the table, didn't go well. And that's the thing. At the time, there was no way to put facts on the table. It was just whatever you said was accepted, and I think that is not true now. So it's riskier unless you really have the facts on your side.
Right. Right.
It's problematic. I would say for anyone who gets into the Baldoni situation or any bad situation, you have to get into court as quickly as possible. You cannot leave it to reporters or newspapers who have a huge incentive to create something that sounds salacious and is kind of entertaining.
Right.
You have to get in front of a judge and a jury with cross-examination, depositions, and you have to say, look, the real penalty for one of these, even if it's incredibly minor, is total career, death. And therefore, my claim is for $100 million or whatever your claim is, given your career.
Do you wish that you would have done that, or is it something?
At the time, I think it was difficult. Maybe, maybe it is what I would recommend to anyone who actually has the facts on your side. If you don't have the facts on your side, I don't really have a recommendation. Hopefully you have a nice vacation house or something. But if the facts are on your side, you have to go to court and fight hard, and it has to become an extremely regrettable experience for the other person.
Right. Well, so I think that kind of gets into the question then of if one has facts on their side or not. This was a question that you raised earlier in your essay, is that if we just look at the most notable Me Too cases and we go down the list, you were going through that list, what we've got is a lot of hoaxes.
My estimate was a conservative estimate. I think like 25% to a third are not real, and a lot of them follow a particular pattern, which breaks down into a few different patterns. Sometimes you have the ex who, whatever, they were going to get married and then they didn't, and then he wound up with somebody else, and then she drops the hammer that it turns out their whole 15-year relationship was a massive sexual harassment or whatever it was.
Right.
So that's kind of category one. And, there are a few different categories that just fall into a pattern that often are not, these often fall apart. And then there are ones that are real. And, my only point is the best way we have of knowing which ones are real and which ones are not is getting into a courtroom.
Right.
And that's just the most objective context that we have. Like, we don't have anything better than that. And so, that's what you need to do. You need to push it to go there. Almost nothing will suffice, to equal the authority of a court finding. And we need to make it easy for plaintiffs to get in front of juries, which right now it is not easy.
I totally agree with you that if you're wanting to clear your name, you got to file a lawsuit. It's unfortunate that it's so expensive and so difficult, but...
And what that means, though, is that people who have, less than a certain amount of money are just not going to be able to defend themselves, because if you're really going to go through the whole lawsuit with discovery and filing a claim and going to court, blah blah blah, it costs a lot more than most people have. So the system we have right now, unless you're rich, you still cannot defend yourself. It's as if we're back in Metoo version 1. So that is a problem that probably should be corrected. But I would not be surprised, especially given the administration's personal experience with some of these issues. I would not be surprised if the law of libel was changed by statute at a federal level. Right now, every state has different libel laws, which really makes no sense, because nobody has a reputation just in one state, particularly if you're a public figure,
Right.
which all these cases are public figures.
Right.
And so I would not be surprised. I really think the world of defamation, Me Too version 2, which we're in now, and the whole world of defamation and libel, I think this is just the beginning. It's
Right.
not like we've made some evolution and now it's going to stop.
Right.
I think it continues, and a lot of these cases that we could discuss, you haven't heard the last about them. I think they will be. There is a prospect of future litigation.
I am curious as an outsider about what the process was like from you in your situation, getting accused of BS and going through this Amazon investigation that end up clearing you and what have you, and then this thing coming up again, and then Amazon. What's the process between that and then you having to step down without giving away? Like, I'm not saying like I want to know what conversations with particular people or your boss or whatever, but like in general, is the attitude was the attitude by Amazon that like, well, yeah, we believe you. We know this is BS. We already investigated it, but look, you see the times we're living in. You're going to have to step down. Was that like, what's the attitude, the corporate attitude in a case like this? Because I think they treated you terribly.
Well, you basically just get suspended while they think about it. And then
Mhm.
once they've thought about it, they give you a call and say, hey, we're getting a divorce.
Is it just very, I guess I'm asking, is it just very like cold and corporate and by the book? So there's no like, I mean, these people are your friends and coworkers too,
No, they're
presumably, right?
definitely
No?
not your friends. No, what are you talking about? It's not you're not friends. Like
Uh-huh.
it's a, corporate thing where you're an
Yeah.
at-will employee.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you're the Hollywood Reporter or whatever, you can probably get any corporate executive fired, so long as they're not, like the founder who owns half the company or something like that. Because there've been a couple examples where they tried to do that kind of thing, and it just like
Well,
doesn't
they
work
tried to
out.
do it
Like,
with Elon Musk too. I
yeah,
mean,
it's Elon Musk, or it's
a lot of
there
people
was
don't
there was
remember
a
that.
guy in LA in the sports business, but he owns his business. He's not going to fire himself. So whatever. Yeah, and like, yes, if you're like a huge founder and you own 40% of the company, that's probably going to be difficult. But if you're not that, and you're whatever, you're a VP at Walmart or Amazon or Target or whatever, um, if there's an article saying, hey, we think this person is controversial and unpleasant, no matter what the details are, the easiest thing is always going to be to just let the person go, because you can always get somebody else. And
Yeah.
even if yes, that actually it's totally unjust and that this person is very, very nice, and maybe he said one faux pas one time, but really we want to keep him on the team. It just it's just not worth it, because the publicity for a big company, like I'll just take
Right.
Target,
Right.
is like their revenue is so large. Like, no, even if there was a 0.1% reduction in revenue, it's not worth having this one individual. So, anyone can always be fired, and journalists, if they're not very responsible, can make that happen. And I think there was a period that we went through where it was seen as very desirable to to free up some of these jobs and try to capture them, for the other side. And so we went through that period. I do think that period is over. But a lot of the rules are still such that, in theory, it could happen again. And a lot of the people, like the reporters and stuff, really have not been exposed and taken to task.
That's what I was going to say is I think that these reporters are going to be the last ones to learn their lesson. And the one who went after you, what's her name? Kim Masters?
Uh-huh.
I mean, what she did there with that article, and not only with the presentation, the writing of the article, but the way that she really, as I understand it, really pushed your accuser to renew her story and even add some more BS to it, right? Wasn't that article more extensive? She said things more extensive than her original.
Well, apparently there was a long process of convincing, her that this article should happen. And obviously I'm not privy to the details of it, but to, come out with some complaint, and, who knows what that conversation was about.
I guess what I'm saying is these journalists are very much, mainstream media journalists are very much still activists, ideological activists, pushing their own agenda. And so, and also I understand too that Metoo had just happened. You just had the downfall of Harvey Weinstein. So Amazon is probably at that point, they want to try to show that we're not like Miramax, or we're not like the Weinstein Company or whatever. And we may be Hollywood, but we're doing things differently. And so letting go of the studio chief was a way to signal that, even though it was terribly, terribly unjust. And so anyway, but I do think that journalists have not learned their lesson yet, and we're still seeing it with Baldoni Lively. So we will see what happens. All right, well, great conversation. I thank you for talking about your story and about the industry and the situation right now with Metoo and Baldoni versus Lively. And as things progress there, we'll see if we end up getting to a trial. But as things progress there, we'll have you back on. We'll talk about it. But everybody, check Roy out on Twitter. I will link to your Twitter below. And I know you're on other platforms or whatever, but that's a good place for people to see you. And also, you've got your Substack on there, right?
Yeah, I think it's in the link in bio. But you have to be very subtle these days with Substack and X, because they don't.
I know. It's so annoying.
Bitter X's.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk again.
All right. See you later.